This episode wouldn't be possible without Mohawk Group and their commitment to believe in better, to push every boundary and always move forward in design, innovation, and sustainability. Now, what stands out to me is Mohawk's culture of care. That's care for the workforce, care for the environments their products serve, and care for the future they're helping to build. Believe in better is long-term thinking put into practice, not only in their product, but in how they partner with clients like you. You can learn more at mohawkgroup.com. Welcome to Design Nerds Anonymous, the podcast that sparks curiosity at the intersection of business and design. I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, founder and president at Thinklab, and speaker, now featured on TED.com.
And I'm Erica Waayenberg, head of custom research here at Thinklab. I was Amanda's partner throughout this research process. As you listen in, remember you can earn half CU credit just by listening and taking a quick quiz for the episode. You'll find a link to that quiz in the show notes. Now, here are the 4 learning objectives for this episode. First, why decision-making on hospitality projects feels more cautious and harder to move forward today. Second, what hospitality end users say they need most from their partners to keep projects on track. Third, how rising expectations around business knowledge are reshaping the role of designers and project teams. And fourth, where AI is beginning to show up in hospitality workflows and why many teams are exploring it today. All right, let's dive in and start learning.
Okay, if you have listened to other episodes in this series, you'll know that corporate, healthcare, and education each had their own live experiential research events. Big rooms, real-time reactions, dozens of people unpacking the data together, and we've given you an audio window to listen in. So you can hear those episodes earlier in your feed, and education will drop next week.
Hospitality worked a little bit differently. Same rigorous research, this time brands like Hyatt, Marriott, Hilton, Sonesta, and more, just no big event, no stage, no room full of 70 people reacting together.
So that means this episode is our live event. Today, you're not just listening in, we're going to invite you to participate. You're about to hear a distilled version of the keynote that we would have delivered on a stage. But this time, everything is tailored specifically to the hospitality sector.
And then we'll invite you to do what the other sectors did live. Process it, question it, debrief it with your team, and even gather clients and use it as a conversation spark. And yes, we've added DIY discussion prompts to the show notes, so you can run your own mini hackathon with your colleagues or project team after you listen. So settle in. Because for hospitality, this is the room, and you are the participant.
Let's open this episode the way that we've opened the previous 2 this season, with a short series of Would You Rather games. So here's the first one. When thinking about projects for the built environment, would you rather A, pay 20% more for the ability to pause, pivot, and restart? Or B, save 20%, but be locked into a rigid timeline and process? So we're going to invite you to put yourself in the mind of the decision maker. Take a second and pick one.
Well, whatever you picked, across the sectors that we studied, this one question was remarkably consistent. For corporate and education, nearly 90% chose flexibility over savings. Healthcare wasn't far behind at just over 70%. If teams have to choose today, most would rather pay for the option to adapt.
All right, let's jump into our second one. Again, put yourself in the mindset of the decision maker. Would you rather A, have a partner who spots problems before they happen? Or B, have a partner who crushes crises in the moment? Truly take a moment and choose one.
Now, this question had the strongest emotional reaction of all. Corporate leaned proactive at around 60%. Education jumped to 80%. But healthcare, an overwhelming 95% chose being proactive as being one of the fastest ways to build trust.
All right, here's our last round in this game. Would you rather A, collaborate with a brand new team at a company that you already trust? Or B, collaborate with a trusted team that is now working for a company that you have never heard of?
This is where things got interesting. Corporate and healthcare leaders overwhelmingly said they would stay with the company that you trust, even with a brand new team. But education flipped that. 60% said they'd follow their trusted team into unfamiliar territory. It was the only sector where people outranked the brand. Now, hold on to the choices that you just made. They're going to matter as we break down what's happening in hospitality today.
I want to start with why we did this work. Why do we research this topic? Across every sector, our goal was simple. Help everyone involved in projects for physical spaces understand how decisions are made today. Of course, we wanted to spark ideas for how you and your teams can respond, and yes, offer a little group therapy along the way. Because if you touch any part of the project ecosystem around the built environment, be it design, construction, manufacturing, sales, product procurement, you've already felt this change. So what we're doing here is naming it, clarifying it, and hopefully giving you the language that can help you take it back to your project teams to make change for the better.
If you're wondering where these insights came from, they're drawn from a mix of qualitative and quantitative work across all 4 sectors we studied. We held virtual end-user forums, captured dozens of confessional booth interviews, and gathered more than 3,000 survey data points comparing our industry to broader B2B buying behaviors.
So while every episode in this series sounds a little different, the backbone is the same. Rigorous research and conversations with the people making and influencing real project decisions.
Before we go any further, let's align on language because these terms matter.
And this is something that was so funny about our live events. Erica, you can attest to this, is this was probably our most photographed slide when we did this presentation live. So let's run through the terms. First off, when we say end user, we mean the person working at the client organization, like Hyatt, Sonesta, Hilton, those that we shared earlier. These are the folks that are deciding how to invest in this space. The brand, maybe an ownership group, franchisee, operator, or development partner. Often these folks have a design background that participated in this research. Then, when we say service provider, we mean the teams bringing the project to life. Think of design firms, GCs, construction partners, reps, and consultants. You've heard from many of them that participated as part of our other live podcast episodes. Then, when we say product partner, we mean manufacturers, dealers, and distributors who are supplying the furniture, materials, lighting, flooring, technology, or other product.
Together, these groups form the project ecosystem, and our research looks at how decisions move through that ecosystem and what's shifting that flow today.
So why this topic? Put simply, we started this research because our product side clients kept telling us project decisions are just taking longer. And we wanted to know why. And per usual, at Thinklab, we love to use data to help tell the story. 86% of the end users that we surveyed said that their decision-making process has changed significantly in the past 3 years. And here's another favorite insight. The average decision-making team for projects for the built environment has effectively doubled in the past 5 years. So it's no wonder that everything feels slower and more complex. We'll link to the full breakdown, the how, why, who, and what in the show notes. So if you want more information, you can certainly find it there.
And those numbers set up what we're about to share next. Across sectors, we mapped where end users feel the most pain, frustration throughout the project process, from early planning all the way through installation. And here's what shocked us. The heaviest pain wasn't at the end. It wasn't during construction. It was right at the beginning. And when we zoom in on hospitality, the year-over-year shift has been dramatic. Just 1 year ago, leaders described that early stage pain with words like iterative, chaotic, hurried, agile, adaptable. This year, not even close. This year, we heard words like heavy lift, tight, strained, and two themes that dominated the conversation were value and AI.
And that shift wasn't just in words. Our data reinforced it. Across sectors, rising cost ranked the highest in terms of pain points at 47%. But the second biggest challenge, you may have heard in a couple of episodes this season, at 22% was burnout. That means 22% of our survey takers said that that was their biggest challenge in projects. And I want to pause here for a minute just because I'm writing a book, so you all are the first to hear that important announcement that will be out in May of 2026. And in that book, I cite a really staggering statistic from Gallup that really supports this as well. Their 2025 workplace report opens with this question: is the global workplace at a breaking point? And the data suggests that we may be approaching one. It's really interesting that over the last year, global employee engagement, including all of these folks making decisions at these hospitality spaces, fell sharply compared to the previous year. And it's the only measured decline in the past 12 years, with one exception, which was a similar drop in 2020 around the COVID lockdowns. So I think that that is really stark and probably an important thing for us just to pause and acknowledge here for just a moment that, you know what, everything feels like it's moving faster, but all of these teams are trying to do more with less, and it really, truly is leading to burnout. And I feel like nowhere did this topic show up in our private, virtual, behind-the-scenes sessions than with this hospitality group. For many, this emotional strain was palpable. And I have to say, I've been running this business for a long time. It was one of the few times in Thinklab's history when a research conversation nearly moved our participants to tears. So we promised you group therapy. We're giving you a little taste of what that was like. So Erica, I don't know if you have anything to add from your observations specifically of this session, but it was loud.
It was loud. And I think the conversation around burnout is loud. You hear it in podcasts, you see it on headlines, you read books about it. The conversation is very loud, but you're right, Amanda. This was a room of what could be considered relative competitors. And to have them connect in a way that was so emotional and visceral around the struggle that they're having with their teams and trying to retain talent, empower talent, and mentor their talent. It's creating tremendous burnout throughout the entire organization, but especially at that leadership level. So now that we've set that context, let's get to the heart of it. Next, we're going to explore the 5 core challenges and opportunities shaping hospitality projects today. And our goal is simple. If we can name what's really happening for our end users, the entire project ecosystem can work smarter, faster, and with a lot more empathy.
So let's start with theme 1, which was risk aversion and lack of autonomy. Because underneath all of that burnout that we mentioned earlier, there's something deeper happening. People are pulling back from making decisions on their own. Not because they don't care, but because the stakes feel higher. The scrutiny feels sharper. And the margin for error feels non-existent.
Exactly. Last year's Would You Rather game showed us that 90% of participants actually chose that they would rather double the size of their committee than make the decision on their own. One person put it bluntly: No one feels like they have autonomy today. Another added, there's a massive fear post-pandemic of owning decisions. The larger brands are restructuring to try to streamline that, but it's tough. There needs to be a clear line between who decides what and when. Otherwise, everyone comments on planter colors.
So the story here isn't that people are resistant to making decisions. It's that the conditions around them have shifted. Tighter budgets, higher scrutiny, less clarity from leadership. And when autonomy shrinks, committees grow, and timelines inevitably stretch. So with that, let's move on to theme 2, which I think is incredibly related. Theme 2 is overwhelming pace, burnout, and speed. So if theme 1 was about how decisions are being made, theme 2 is about the pace which people are being asked to make them. And as you've already heard in this episode, this one came through loud and clear. The speed of hospitality today isn't just fast, it's unsustainable. We heard story after story from those participating in this research who feel like they're running full tilt while the ground keeps shifting underneath them.
Yes, and what stood out wasn't just the workload. It was a combination of tighter timelines, tighter budgets, tighter staffing, and the same expectations as before. One participant told us, the train doesn't stop moving, but you're like, whoa, 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 I'm trying to make that change. So people aren't just busy, they're being asked to deliver future-ready, future-proof solutions while barely keeping up with the present. One participant summed it up perfectly for us. They said, nobody's pressing pause to let us fix the process. Efficiency does not equal effectiveness. And another added, if your projects are already train wrecked, reviewing in CDs won't help.
And that is the paradox. Everyone knows the process needs to evolve. Earlier alignment, earlier clarity, earlier triage. But no one feels like they have the time or breathing room or even autonomy to fix the process while they're stuck inside it. All right, let's move on to theme 3, rising expectations for business acumen. And this one was a fascinating part of the discussion. It zooms in on kind of a different kind of pressure. The expectations that are placed on design teams themselves. Because today, it's not enough to design a beautiful space. Designers are now expected to speak the language of business. ROI, market performance, operational constraints, RevPAR, revenue pressures, the whole system.
That's exactly right. And what we learned a few years ago was that designers now had to be human psychologists, and now designers also have to have a business degree. I'm very
marriage
glad
counselors
that I'm not today. Yes. But that shift did come through loud and clear. One participant actually put it really simply. They said, we cannot just be designers in there. You need to look at the whole thing, the whole project. Another shared, most designers today just aren't prepared to look at projects through the lens of business, not just design. It's a reminder that design decisions don't live in a vacuum. They're tied to financial performance, guest expectations, operations, and brand strategy overall.
And here's the hard part. The industry has raised the bar on business fluency, but we haven't necessarily equipped teams to meet it. Designers are being asked to do different work, sometimes more work. They're being asked to understand more of the work that surrounds their expertise, their piece of that puzzle. And the better we are at connecting those dots together, the faster and more confidently decisions can move. With that, let's move on to theme 4 of 5. We're almost there, folks. Theme 4 was AI as relief, not replacement. So this theme shifts us into one of the most practical and I would say, ironically, most hopeful conversations we heard. And that is how AI is starting to show up in hospitality. Because while no one in our sessions believed that AI should replace human creativity, not in any stretch, everyone agreed on this. There's a lot of work on these teams that doesn't necessarily need a human to do it. Maybe a human in the loop, maybe human assisted, but if we want to relieve this pressure that we've talked about for a majority of this episode, AI could be relief, but not replacement.
And that is exactly where AI is starting to feel a little less like a threat and more like perhaps a pressure valve. One participant said it best. They said, let AI do the busy work so that you can have time to be more human. We're not suggesting that AI originates the design, but can AI help keep up with the busy work so that you can help show what that design really means? Another pointed to everyday efficiency gaps that we've all felt. Why are we taking an hour and a half to write meeting minutes? Instead of spending 90 minutes, now you're spending 20 minutes reviewing the AI summary.
What stood out here wasn't hype. It was practicality. AI isn't solving everything, but it is giving teams something they desperately need: time. Now, in our view, AI is so far from replacing designers, but it could replace some of these busy work tasks that keep designers from doing their best thinking or focusing those designers where they're best. And I'd say in a sector drowning in pace and pressure, that shift might be more than helpful. It might be essential. And I want to sidebar here a little bit because we just hosted a Jeffersonian dinner on the hospitality sector. And we had an AI expert. He was a fascinating gentleman that's really looking how AI is influencing workflows. And one of the things that he talked about a little bit was about websites and how AI is really influencing not only the design process, but really even the process of how clients find out and interact with these hospitality brands. He said, if your website is just a brochure telling them about your property, about what they can do, and not an interactive, almost like an agent that helps you make decisions and connect them with pieces, that your company is going to be outmoded. I thought that was a really interesting take on AI and how it's going to affect hospitality. Erica, I'm curious in your work if you've heard anything else really interesting about AI specific to this hospitality sector.
Yeah, I think that both applicable to hospitality and the pressures we're feeling here, but also just broader as well. One of the things that I see AI being incredibly influential and as a great resource for is actually that learning gap. We talked about designers needing to understand the business side of hospitality. Well, prompting AI with a question that says, help me understand all of the things that I don't know about how hospitality businesses are run is a great way to start, right? That's a great way to be researching terms that you're unfamiliar with or not understanding what a cap stack is. You know, these are ways that designers can fill that knowledge gap in pretty efficient time.
So interesting. We actually talk about that. It's chapter 15, shift 10 in the book talks about using AI not just for efficiency, but really using it as role playing for skills development. So I love that you brought that up. And we are hearing of some teams exploring with those things. All right, let's move on to theme 5 of 5, which is staffing, skills gaps, and a generational crunch. So I think this plays into this AI conversation beautifully. In our research, it's something that every hospitality leader seems to be feeling. This talent crunch came up in our virtual research this year. And I feel like even if the process were perfect, which we all know it isn't, many teams simply don't have the staffing or skill mix that they need today to keep these projects moving, especially with all these pressures we're facing.
That's right. And it's really showing up in two ways. So first is the pipeline. Leaders told us they're struggling to find qualified candidates. One person said, I literally have had 0 qualified candidates for an entry-level role. And even when teams can hire, there's a second issue, which is experience. People are being asked to lead before they've had a chance to learn. As one of our participants said, there's a lack of experience and a lack of opportunity to gain it. So what's the result? Of course, a widening gap, because what we see between how the work happens now and what it's going to require, those teams just haven't been trained, resourced, and prepared to deliver at that level. And that's especially true for those younger team members, that entry-level employee. Leaders describe them as smart, capable, and full of potential, but not always confident enough to stand their ground in a room full of seasoned decision makers. One participant actually said, people are being promoted, but they don't necessarily know how to lead yet.
Which is so interesting because I feel like we heard this from some of these end users, especially talking about some of the service providers that are serving them. It came up in our corporate sector where they said it feels like you can have scale or skill, but you can't have both. And I think that's especially interesting in this topic as we're talking about AI, because there's all of this hype around AI taking away all these entry-level workers. Well, here's a sector that has entry-level roles and can't find them. And I think it's also really highlighting this gap of even experienced people on the service provider side that really haven't upskilled their people enough so that clients are feeling like they have to help step in and fill these gaps that they have partnered with these companies to provide. So such an interesting discussion, so many challenges here. And our goal of sharing all of these challenges is really around giving you empathy into their world, because where there are challenges, there is opportunity. And theme 5 was really about the long game. If the industry wants faster, clearer, more confident decisions, we really have to invest in the people making them. So that means mentoring, upskilling, creating new space to grow, not just hoping people will figure it out under pressure. And I'll say for any of our product or service providers listening in, again, where there's challenges, that means there's opportunities for your teams to step in, which makes you that irresistible, indispensable resource. Because without that, no amount of process improvement or technology will fix all of these bottlenecks that are being created by a talent pipeline that's stretched too thin.
So now that we've walked through those 5 big themes, it's your turn.
In our corporate healthcare and education events, this is the moment when we first shared real stories from real teams on the stage. But obviously, we don't have a live panel here because we wanted to protect the anonymity of the participants in our research. So we're skipping over the live panel and we're jumping straight to the moment where 70 people in a large room rolled up their sleeves, sat shoulder to shoulder, across the ecosystems and started brainstorming how to solve these problems together. So we want to invite you to create that same experience wherever you are. So here's your invitation. Gather a few colleagues, maybe pull in a few partners that you trust, or even invite a client that you'd love to collaborate with more deeply. And we want to invite you to run this exercise yourself.
We've added a downloadable worksheet, the same one we used live. So right now it's in the show notes and you can use that to spark your conversation. Map where your team feels the most friction personally and maybe where those outside teams are feeling the most friction as well. And then explore together. What can you do differently on that very next project?
And when you do this, I would personally love to hear what emerges. You can always reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, Amanda Schneider, and share what your group uncovered or maybe ideas that you've developed. Who knows? Your insights might just show up in a future episode of Design Nerds Anonymous.
Our story from hospitality ends here, but the dialogue it sparked is only just beginning. Maybe this episode gave you language for what you've been feeling in your own projects. Maybe it helped you see your hospitality partners or your own team with a little bit more empathy. If it did, I'd invite you to share it. Send it to a colleague, a client, or a partner who's living through this reality with you. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can say is, you're not the only one.
And that's what was so interesting, because in these live sessions, we did have our design confessionals immediately following. And one of the most common things we heard was, I'm so relieved to hear that I'm not alone. So if you can be a catalyst to spark those types of feelings from your clients, from your colleagues, from your partners in your market, we hope that you take advantage of this opportunity. Next week, we'll take you inside our live event at Ed Spaces in Columbus. This is where we brought together education leaders, designers, and partners from the education sector and explored why decision-making in schools is so hard to align, and how clear communication can move learning forward. So if you listen to today thinking, I want to be part of those conversations, Again, I'm going to invite you to reach out to me, Amanda Schneider, directly on LinkedIn. We are curating our 2026 live research sessions and participants, and there's always room for new voices and a few design nerds to join us. As a reminder, if you'd like CEU credits for this episode, don't forget to look for the quiz in the show notes. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Design Nerds Anonymous is a proud member of the Surround Podcast Network. Special thanks to our podcast production team, Rob Schulte and Rachel Senator. Hi there, I'm Amanda Schneider, host of the Design Nerds Anonymous podcast and founder of Thinklab, Sandow Design Group's research division. At Thinklab, we work directly with the architecture and design community to gather real-world insight that influences the decisions brands and leaders in this industry and beyond are making right now. We've built a research community where your expertise helps shape what's next. And the best part is, you get paid for your perspective. From quick surveys to focus groups and advisory opportunities, your voice matters. If you're interested in getting involved, simply click the link in the show notes to start sharing your perspective today.